This is the National Marijuana News.
You have found the country's first unbiased news program about medical and recreational marijuana.
Science, medicine, business, politics, legal, lifestyle.
This is the National Marijuana News.
Today on the National Marijuana News, author of Black Tuna Diaries and founder of the Silver Tour, Robert Platshorn. Legendary rock and roll manager from Silverback Entertainment, John Phillips. And from Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, or CALM, Scott Chipman. But first, here's your National Marijuana News top story with Toby Lynn.
New Jersey Mayor Chris Christie is at it again. Earlier this year, he questioned the, quote, quality of life in Colorado, which is one of 2 states to legalize cannabis for recreational use. And on his recent radio show, Christie, addressed concerns about low enrollment in the state's medical marijuana program. Advocates say most physicians are reluctant to take part in the program because they don't want to be publicly associated with medical marijuana. But Christie said it's actually the lack of demand for medical marijuana itself.
The reason, I think, is there's not that much of a demand for this. All this conversation about what a huge demand there would be for medical marijuana, what there's a huge demand for is marijuana, not medical marijuana. See, because when we run a medically based program, you don't see the demand. And what did these folks say? They weren't making enough money. This program and all these other programs, in my mind, are a front for legalization.
Christie also called the program a fallacy. I'm Toby Lynn.
The National Marijuana News is on the air.
Hi there, and welcome to the show where we report and talk about both medicinal as well as recreational marijuana in a totally unbiased approach. We'll explore the benefits of medicinal marijuana from all angles. We'll do the same about recreational. You can join in the conversation and the controversy as we help America get the facts about marijuana.
And now, Todd Dankin and Jen Gentile.
I'm Todd Dankin with Jen Gentile, and you're listening to the National Marijuana News. One of the most underrepresented sections of the population when it comes to medical marijuana are senior citizens. What's becoming apparent is that more and more seniors are trying or are being prescribed medical marijuana to help with the multitude of ailments that people in old age deal with. Robert Platshorn started Silver Tour, which is an organization that goes around the country informing and educating seniors about the benefits of medical marijuana. Robert is also a well-known former criminal who spent almost 30 years in prison for smuggling a whole boatload of marijuana into the United States.
Literally.
We're going to talk about that in just a bit. So, Robert, welcome to the National Marijuana News.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, Robert, before we get to talking about the Silver Tour, let's talk about your well-publicized past. You were part of what became known as the Black Tuna Gang, and you spent almost 30 years in prison for smuggling, 500 tons of marijuana into the United States. So what led you to do that, and what did prison teach you?
You take the hand you're dealt, and you try to make the best of it and do something positive with it. I don't look back. I learned when I traveled and I met people all over the country, and I found out when they saw the story from both sides, they always came down on my side. And, of course, when I would go to places like Hempfest and Hempstalk and all the High Times events, I found that I could use that celebrity to get a message out, and the message is to seniors.
Hey, Robert, Jen Gentile, you wrote a best-selling book, The Black Tuna Diaries, so obviously you're using it to your advantage.
Yeah, it's in the 5th printing.
You've been a big part of the war on drugs, the failed war on drugs, should I say, and so I'd like to get your feeling on how the government failed in this huge effort.
The war on drugs was a sham to begin with. It was never about marijuana. It was to stop the progress of the hemp industry, because in the early 30s, when it became possible to produce paper and other products out of hemp, it would have seriously hurt the wood pulp industry, Hearst Papers in particular. He controlled the newsprint industry and owned the largest forestry company in the world, Kimberly-Clark. It would have effectively made millions of acres of timber totally worthless. And, of course, at that time, hemp oil had been used to produce the early plastics. And when DuPont wanted to switch to petrochemicals, there was a lot of resistance, and hemp made a lot more sense.
You know, most people don't know this, but, marijuana was removed from the U.S. pharmacopoeia in 1942. So prior to 1942, this has been a therapeutic, legitimate medicine for certain people.
It was the second most prescribed medicine in this country from the mid-19th to the mid-20th century. And when it was outlawed in 1937, the American Medical Association refused to take it from the pharmacopoeia until the government started arresting doctors at a wholesale rate,
right,
in order to force them to do that. The good news is it's changing, and it's changing fast. And I have the unique perspective that I've been on both sides of the drug war.
Yeah, speaking of the side that you're on now, you've really involved yourself in the medical marijuana world, and you formed Silver Tour. So tell us why it's so important to educate senior citizens about the benefits of marijuana.
Seniors vote. I worked hard when Prop 19 was on the ballot in 2010 in California for legalization. And I tried to warn people that if it didn't pass, the federal government would take that as a signal that they could walk in and start shutting down California, the marijuana industry. And, of course, that's precisely what happened. And when I looked at the exit polls from that vote, I realized that it was nothing but senior citizens that voted no on that issue. And the reason was nobody was talking to them. Seniors are the most important voting bloc in this country.
Robert, you're also involved with the Florida chapter of NORML, which is another real pivotal organization involved in the fight for legalizing medical marijuana. What kind of work have you been doing with them, and how are you getting the word out?
Because I'm an old pitchman and I know how to use television, how to buy television time very inexpensively, when I produced my show, I produced it in infomercial format, and that's how we've been able to put on Should Grandma Smoke Pot probably 2,000 to 3,000 times in a dozen different states.
It sounds like, how you told the story, how your generation invented pot. I love that slogan. And now what you're doing is just kind of reaching out to your generation who's just older now. So is it really the whole hippie generation who really introduced this, marijuana to the culture, and now they're just grandmas now, right? I mean, isn't that what's happening?
They're grandmas, they're grandpas, and they're really not reluctant to go back to what they enjoyed when they were younger, and today get the medical benefits from it. Most of them don't want to smoke anymore, but they're very much into edibles, oils, concentrates, brownies, and vaporizers.
And I bet it makes everybody feel young again, too, doesn't it?
It does. I was on Jon Stewart's Daily Show. They did a feature, which they've run many times since, called Old Tokes Home. and they came down to one of my Silver Tour shows. Everybody had a ball. Today they keep inviting me back. I got senior communities calling me constantly. Can't you come and talk to us? We're interested.
How are doctors responding to the Silver Tour?
Doctors are coming around, and it's really only recently that they're coming out of the closet.
So, Robert, in your opinion, are we headed for a bright future when it comes to legalization?
Yes, we are. Things are moving very, very quickly.
He is the legendary Bobby Tuna, Robert Platshorn, and he's now sponsoring the silvertour.org. Also the author of the Black Tuna Diaries. If you want to find out more about Robert, go to thenationalmarijuananews.com. We've got his links. And what do you think about what you just heard? We've got our 24/7 hotline open for your comments. Let us know where you're listening to the National Marijuana News. What city, what state, what country? It's 1-800-549-0859. That's 800-549-0859. Robert, thanks so much for being with us on the National Marijuana News.
It's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Coming up on the National Marijuana News, Todd and Jen talk to legendary rock and roll manager from Silverback Entertainment, John Phillips. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned for more of the National Marijuana News.
You're listening to the National Marijuana News with Todd Dankin and Jen Gentile.
Some man live his life for profits alone. That very same man, he lives his life all alone.
You are listening to Slightly Stupid here on the National Marijuana News. I'm Todd Dankin with Jen Gentile, and we're here with John Phillips, the founder and president of Silverback Management. It is one of the biggest and most successful music management and promotion companies, and he represents one of the biggest marijuana bands in the world. Slightly Stupid. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
So, John, tell us about Slightly Stupid and their connection to marijuana, and then we'll get into some of the specifics.
Okay. Well, Slightly Stupid is a band from Ocean Beach, California. They were actually founded by Bradley Nowell, who is a lead singer and guitar player of Sublime. He found Slightly Stupid. They're two guys, Miles and Kyle, are the two guys from San Diego that started the band as kids, and Bradley kind of unearthed them when they were just teenagers and still kind of playing around with getting serious about starting a band, and he put their first record out on Skunk Records in 1996, and basically he told me that, hey, these guys were going to carry the torch for, the California lifestyle music scene, and subsequently, I think the marijuana movement as it relates to music and coming from our subculture.
Well, you've obviously got to worry about sponsorship, and marijuana-related companies aren't allowed to advertise on mainstream radio and TV. So how does that affect your sponsorship of your tours?
I think that some companies have shied away from getting involved. More mainstream companies might shy away from that. The marijuana industry, as it's become larger, more significant, and becoming more legal, certainly it opens up business opportunities and sponsorship opportunities on that end, and that's been somewhat lucrative.
John, how important is making that crossover and getting a real non-marijuana related sponsor?
Well, we've had those too. I mean, we've had outdoor companies, we've had alcohol sponsors. I mean, we've had sponsors of all kinds, really. So, like I said, it's in some cases maybe a more mainstream company might shy away from it, but it hasn't been completely prohibitive.
John Phillips is here with us on the National Marijuana News. He is the founder and president of Silverback Management, representing a lot of bands, but specifically here talking about Slightly Stupid. Talk about the political and social aspects of Slightly Stupid. What is their influence on this movement?
They claim not to be overtly political, and they're not. Again, they're a group of people that have a lifestyle that emanates from growing up in California and living by the coast and playing music and really preaching freedom and living life to its fullest. And I don't think that they've ever taken any real political stance.
So they're not the MC5?
They're definitely not. Although Wayne Kramer from the MC5 has played with Slightly Stupid. They did a benefit. It was with Sublime, who we discussed the connection earlier. Yep. And it was a benefit for Normal called a joint relief benefit.
John Phillips is here on the National Marijuana News. He's the founder and president of Silverback Management. Now, John, you work with lots of bands, and there's lots of bands that you don't work with. So from the ones that you don't work with, who's really influencing the cannabis scene?
Growing up in the Bay Area of California and seeing the Grateful Dead and experiencing their movement, subculture, and approach to the music business certainly is a huge influence. And of course, they preach the freedoms of libations, and also were preachers of allowing their shows to be traded for free amongst their fans back when it was analog and tape driven. So they actually had taping sections, and they were the only band to ever do something like that. And that went against the grain of the music business because it went against everything that a record label would stand for. No, you can't have free music because it's going to prevent us from selling the music. But the Grateful Dead understood quite early that that was going to be essential for their fans. Yeah. And that's what we're really, at the end of the day, I mean, playing music for the fans, and that exchange of that energy is probably what's most important to most of my clients who play music for a living. It's still that interchange of energy between fans, and to participate in a communal kind of aspect like that, I'd say Grateful Dead's probably the number one influence.
This is John Phillips, the founder and president of Silverback Management and manager of Slightly Stupid. If you want to know more about John and his company and everything that his bands are doing, go to thenationalmarijuananews.com.
Much more to come on the National Marijuana News. Next, we'll talk to the co-founder of Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana. Scott Chipman joins us in our next segment. More of the National Marijuana News coming up.
The phone lines are open at 800-549-0859.
We're listening to you.
800-549-0859.
The National Marijuana News. We'll be right back after these messages.
You have found the country's first unbiased news program about medical and recreational marijuana.
The National Marijuana News.
This is Jen Gentile, and here is some national marijuana news with Todd Dankin.
Thank you, Jen. The famous cliche, women can't live with them, can't live without them. Sorry, Jen. That's been around for ages. But when it comes to marijuana legalization, only the latter holds true. A recent study has proven that without women, the efforts to legalize cannabis across the country would not only fail, but they would fail miserably. In fact, women are a more important demographic for marijuana than young people or senior citizens. The study by British researchers found that one of the keys to winning approval for marijuana legalization ballot initiatives in 2012 was strategic targeting of female voters between the ages of 30 and 50. Researchers at Global Drug Policy Observatory at Swansea University in Britain released a paper called Selling Cannabis Regulation. It stated that, quote, having learned from experiences in California, campaign strategists for Colorado's Amendment 64 and Washington's Initiative 502 consequently identified key demographic groups, particularly women aged 30 to 50, unquote. To get their findings, researchers examined why ballot initiatives to legalize marijuana won the support of voters in Washington state and Colorado, but failed in Oregon in 2012. In Washington state and Colorado, voters overwhelmingly backed measures, both by 55%, while Oregon's initiative was defeated with 53% of the voters rejecting it. The 2012 study showed women were the key demographic in those historic marijuana campaigns, where activists directed much of their attention to 30 to 50-year-old women. And at the end of the day, it was women who made history. It should be noted that since this study was conducted, Oregon has gone on to pass marijuana legalization that allows residents to use cannabis both medicinally and recreationally. I'm Todd Dankin with your National Marijuana News headlines.
The National Marijuana News is on the air.
And it's Todd Dankin with Jen Gentile, and we are the first unbiased news show of its kind to inform and educate the country on the marijuana legalization movement. This is Scott Chipman. He is the co-founder of Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, or CALM. Scott, I'm Todd. Welcome to the National Marijuana News.
Well, thank you for taking an unbiased approach.
So, Scott, start out by telling us what led you to start CALM.
Well, I got to go back to my own experience. I am a father. I graduated from high school in 1970. In my own community, I noticed we had stores selling drug paraphernalia, and I mentioned this to other people, and I said, yeah, why is that? You know, we know that drug paraphernalia is illegal. Why would you have all these stores selling it? And this is after 215. However, Prop 215 did not legalize the sale of marijuana in California, unlike what most people think and most people will say. It is still illegal to sell marijuana in California. As far as we were concerned, there not only was there access, there was way too much access, and in particular, there was way too much access to marijuana among our teens. Teen youth in San Diego among 11th graders went up 70% in just a couple of years. And where do the teens say they're getting it? Oh, well, we're getting it through diversion from these pot shops. And we found kids with backpacks full of vials, identifying the stores that they were getting these things. And in the meantime, not one store that was operating what they call dispensary. Not one dispensary in San Diego was operating legally. None had a business license to operate. None were permitted. There was no zone that allowed them. And yet we had 220 stores operating. So, that got me involved. Then I got connected through coalition members to other people across the state and across the country, and we established CALM. And so that's what we've been doing for the last few years, is educating people on why we should not legalize marijuana and why these pot shops are illegal and why they're a danger to society to have these stores in our communities and have more and more marijuana on the streets in the hands of young people as well as young adults.
Scott, this is Jen Gentile, and this is the obvious question that everyone always asks. What are the differences between alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana?
I will go into depth, but let's just ask ourselves one question. Would you rather have your brain surgeon smoke a joint or smoke a cigarette before he operates on you? Obviously, everyone's going to say, oh, yeah. Listen, I would much rather have my kids addicted to cigarettes than to marijuana. And I'll give you a couple of reasons. But the primary one is marijuana is addictive. It is a gateway drug. Ask any of the 123 people who will overdose on some other drug today, every day in the United States, if they had any experience with marijuana on their way up to addiction and abuse and eventual death. So it is a gateway drug, and it is addictive, and it is brain-mind altering. Do cigarettes impair your physical ability? No. Does marijuana? Absolutely. Okay, now why is that? Cigarettes don't affect your motor skills like marijuana. Marijuana, unlike alcohol, marijuana is fat-soluble. Alcohol is water-soluble. Alcohol, the half-life of an alcoholic drink is about an hour. You drink a glass of wine, an hour later, you have less than half of it still in your system. With marijuana, it's fat-soluble. What's the fattiest organ of the body? It's the brain. So let's just say, I like to have a glass of wine with dinner, or maybe a cocktail a couple of nights a week. Will I have a residual effect? Will I have a cumulative additive amount of alcohol in my system over a few days, a few weeks, a few months? No. But if I do the same with marijuana, you're not ever going to reduce the amount of THC in your system. It's just going to gradually get higher and higher and higher because of this half-life issue.
Okay, so we've talked about tobacco. What about alcohol?
Can people become addicted to alcohol, to tobacco, and marijuana? Absolutely. And there are addictive personalities. But in terms of the long-term use of marijuana, the fat solubility, the half-life issue, the cumulative effect, if I stop drinking for a couple of days, do I have residual effect? No. With marijuana, yes.
Well, I have to bring things up like lung cancer and heart disease, drunk driving.
Does anybody think that smoking cigarettes is good for you? No. Does anyone think that children should be smoking cigarettes? No. But a lot fewer have the same opinion about marijuana, and yet marijuana has 400 plus different chemicals in it. The THC is not good. It's brain-mind altering, long-lasting impacts. The incidence of cancer, testicular cancer among men, among those who smoke marijuana, skyrockets. Got 30 times more ammonia than cigarette smoke. So these people who think, marijuana is harmless. Well, not only do you have the carcinogens, not only do you have the lung impacts, and you breathe marijuana, typically you breathe it much deeper, hold it in longer, but you also have the physical impairment and the brain issues, the brain damage for young people.
This is Todd Dankin and Jen Gentile. We are talking with Scott Chipman on the National Marijuana News. He is the co-founder of Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, or CALM. And you can find more information at calm.org. That's CALM.org.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the National Marijuana News, your source for all you need to know about marijuana.
You have found the country's first unbiased news program about medical and recreational marijuana.
This is the National Marijuana News.
This is Todd Dankin and Jen Gentile. We are talking with Scott Chipman on the National Marijuana News. He is the co-founder of Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, or CALM.
So, Scott, in my own home, my son is 13, and we talk about all substances. We talk about tobacco, we talk about alcohol, we also talk about marijuana. And, the interesting thing is when I talk to him about marijuana, I can also talk to him about the health benefits of marijuana. Now, obviously, I discuss with him that, like tobacco, like alcohol, when it's used in a recreational manner, it's used by adults. It's used by people that are over 21. You use it responsibly. You're careful. You don't drive. You don't put yourself in situations where you're going to harm anyone else. How do you handle the situation in your household?
For me, I've got children over 21, and they're still my children. I still want the best for them. I want them to make good decisions. No, I don't want them to do anything that's unhealthy.
So again, what do you say? What do you say to little Charlotte, who is in the Sanjay Gupta special, who's going through 300 epilepsy attacks a month down to 7, in the month, or 300 a week down to 7 for the week? What do you say to a girl like that? What do you say to their parents?
Okay. Well, they're not giving her a high THC marijuana cigarette. They're giving her a droplet of high CBD oil.
Okay, so is that usage okay?
Look, we've got to trust the science. And is CBD oil sprays? I mean, we've got Sativex, we've got Marinol. We do have cannabis-based medicines that are coming on the market or are on the market, and more will be coming, but they are not going to be smoked high THC marijuana. That is what people want it, but there's CBD marijuana out there, right? And there's no demand for it because the vast majority of people who want marijuana want it to get high. They don't want it.
You keep saying the vast majority of people just want to get high, and that confuses me. Where is this information and these studies from when you keep saying that everybody just wants to get high and the people working at the dispensaries, they're just glorified drug dealers?
Have you ever been to a dispensary? Have you ever stood out front of one? Have you ever seen who goes in and goes out?
Your research is watching the patients go in and out of a dispensary?
Oh, it's direct research in a sense. But no, there's the teenage use. What do they say? Well, it must be okay because we've got these stores with a green cross out in front, so it's medicine, right? This is the snake oil of the 21st century. This is no different than a guy with a wagon and a horse traveling around the countryside and opening up his little stand and say, here, buy my snake oil. People have rationalizations all over the board, but just going back to what I said, our coalition has spent hundreds of hours out in front of these establishments, and who do we see going in? Do we ever see somebody roll up and park in the handicap space? Never. Do we see 20-somethings, 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds roll up on their bicycles, jump out of the back seat of a convertible as a 19 or 20-year-old, or roll up on their skateboard, run in, get their baggie of marijuana, and head off? Absolutely. That's what we see. The 99% of the people who are accessing their marijuana through these dispensaries are under the age of 35. 90% of them are males. Go into the dispensary and you see the Cheech and Chong posters on the wall. You see the drug culture magazines on the coffee tables inside. That's what we do. We assess every pot shop that opens. You can go. We've gone into a pot shop and said, we want a recommendation for marijuana. How do we go about it? Oh, well, you go into this room. In 25 or 30 seconds, a doctor is going to get on the computer screen, and you're going to Skype with a doctor for 30 seconds, and that's how you're going to get your medical exam and evidence. And he will provide you a recommendation for medical marijuana. Is that practicing medicine? No.
So let's talk about harm reduction. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, it's a false term that basically said, let's not try to educate people to keep them from using or starting use. Let's just try to lower the harm after they start using. And harm reduction is basically to take the attention off of enforcement, off of prohibition. It's a false premise that you can just reduce the harms.
Scott Chipman is the co-founder of Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, or CALM. You can find out more at calmca.org. That's calmca.org. And also at thenationalmarijuananews.com. And if you agree or disagree with anything said, give us a call at 800-549-0859. Tell us your name, tell us where you're calling from, and then give us your opinion on marijuana. So, Scott, tell me, was this what you thought it was going to be?
I'm pleased to have the opportunity to give the other side of the argument, because a study just came out which indicated only 3% of all stories about marijuana contain anything about the harms. and yet the harms are huge, and more people need to know about them.
Well, we need more guests like you, Scott, so we have 100% of our stories that are providing you, the listener, with both positive and negative points of view, right here on the National Marijuana News.
Thank you.
You're listening to the National Marijuana News, and the National Marijuana News wants to hear what you have to say. Coming up, Todd and Jen take your calls. Dial us up now at 800-549-0859. That's 800-549-0859. This is the National Marijuana News.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the National Marijuana News
with Todd Dankin and Jen Gentile.
This is Todd Dankin and Jen Gentile, and we love hearing success stories here on the National Marijuana News. One of those success stories is Meg Caldwell. Welcome to the show, Meg, and tell us your experience with medical marijuana.
Well, my experience, who would have ever thought, has been a journey. My son Hayden, who is currently 9, started having grand mal seizures at the age of 5. I had somebody reach out to me and say, look, I will make this medicine for you, and we'll do it in different strains. We'll put it in capsules, see what works for him, see if it even makes a difference. You know, ever since Realm of Caring and finding them through the sort of circuitous route of Nate Morris, his program, Jason David, what he's gone through, and actually contacting all these people, and then Paige and Charlotte Figge, and realizing our world is very small, and all of us parents who have kids that are suffering are there to help each other. The Realm of Caring group has been such an amazing family and wealth of knowledge. On top of that, just a support, because you feel so isolated when your child is, you know, I don't want to say debilitated, but when his personality has been dampened down by pharmaceuticals and he's still having seizures and he can't go to school, and you know, you're just every minute you're hovering and you're looking for if he has a seizure, and if he falls here, how is he going to hurt himself?
Right.
It's horrifying to be letting him take a shower, standing there outside the shower, and you know, really, I feel like he's under surveillance. And he has had a drop seizure in the shower, and I jumped in with all my clothes on to try and catch him. He still hit his head. It's the only place he doesn't wear a helmet. It's heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching to see your child go through the seizures, but to be able to be with other families that have similar situations, that have dealt with this, that can give you encouragement, that can give you tips, that can give you doctor recommendations. It's funny because the first time we gave it to him, he said, well, it kind of tastes like grass. And I said, when did you eat grass?
What kid doesn't, right? Kids eat everything.
Exactly. So he does refer to it as his grass medicine, which is really kind of funny.
That is funny. Hey, Meg, what do you say to the naysayers? What do you say to the folks who say, what are you doing? And how can you do this? And, you know, the folks who just say this stuff doesn't work.
Well, luckily, nobody said that to my face. And my response is, if you have a child who's having seizures or cancer or any medical problem that this could potentially help, wouldn't you give it a try?
Hey, Meg, thanks for sharing your story here on the National Marijuana News. Please give a high five to Hayden for us and keep us updated on his progress, will you?
Sure will.
We're always here waiting for you at 800-549-0859. That's our hotline, and you can either call us during the show or leave us a voice message. Once again, that's 800-549-0859. Please tell us where you're listening and give us your comments on any of the subjects we've covered here or on our website at thenationalmarijuananews.com.
Eddie is joining us on the National Marijuana News. He is in New Jersey. Hi, Eddie. What's your question?
Hey, guys. How you doing? A great show there. I caught the interview with about the Compassionate Care Act. I'm a little bit torn between, the reform in New York State being beneficial or potentially a danger to marijuana reform on the East Coast. And, in your opinion, is it a positive step in the right direction, or do you see the Compassionate Care Act being sort of something that could stunt the growth of progressive reform on the East Coast?
Well, I think the overall view for the movement, if you will, is that any step in the right direction is a good step. So, 19 million people in New York and 5 approved grows and 20 approved dispensaries, it's just not going to work. So the thing they're doing, in my opinion, is that they are setting themselves up to change. They got past what they needed to get past, and now they're going to really legislate and really work out all of the kinks. Thanks, Eddie, and remember that you can call us here 24/7 here on our toll-free hotline, 800-549-0859. That's 800-549-0859. You can also leave your comments online or on our Facebook page and on our website at thenationalmarijuananews.com. Tim is on the line right now in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Tim, what do you have for us?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for calling.
Thank you. I've been listening to your shows for quite a while now since you've gone on digitally. I've been living in Colorado for the last 40 years, so I've been aware of the changes that have gone on in our state with regards to marijuana. I'm not a marijuana smoker. Based on the listener calls and comments that you've been getting throughout these last few shows, does it seem to you that the country is aware of everything that's going on in the marijuana movement, or does it seem like you guys have a whole lot of teaching to do?
You know what? That's the problem with what's happening in the country today, is that people are not educated. Most people's education in this industry is what they've seen on CNN with Sanjay Gupta. And thank God somebody like him goes on TV and explains what the marijuana plant can do and what it has been doing for years. Thanks for the call, Tim. And don't forget, you can also call us here on the National Marijuana News anytime at 800-549-0859. That's 800-549-0859. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Todd Dankin.
And I'm Jen Gentile.
And you've been listening to the National Marijuana News. Stay informed, stay educated, stay unbiased. We'll see you next time.
For more in-depth, unbiased news and to join the conversation, go to our website at thenationalmarijuananews.com. And you can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/nationalmjnews. And if you want your voice to truly be heard, call us toll-free and sound off at 1-800-549-0859. Again, that number is 1-800-549-0859. Please join us again next time on the National Marijuana News.